There you go. James, where do you want? I'll just. Well, yeah, and I can speak to. I've got the. We're in. Okay. Yeah. Well.
I'm good. How are you? Hi, Jerry.
Good morning, folks. It's 9:30. We're going to wait another 5 minutes. I imagine Councillor Devine is in traffic and on his way, and we just want to give him a couple more minutes. So 5 more minutes and we'll get started. Thanks.
All right. I know, right?
There's something else. 19. 19. Okay. I have to send I moved the lead. I moved the scope.
Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our continuing Budget Committee meetings. This morning we have 5 delegations. We're going to start with those, and we are going to go out of order. I know that there are some folks in the audience who have other commitments, and I want to make sure that we hear from them first. So I want to start with Stu Allen. Is Stu Allen here? And this is in relation to the skating fees or the ice fees. Welcome, Mr. Allen, and if you could just give us your address as well, please.
Yes, good morning. 565 Briardine Road in Cambridge. I'm here this morning on behalf of the Press and Figure Skating Club and the proposed changes to the ICE user fees. For the past several years, the ICE time price increases charged by the City of Cambridge to minor sports ICE user groups has remained steady at around 3%, which, as I understand it, 2% was going to the increased costs of ICE and 1% to a reserve fund in case there was any emergencies. With inflation running at under 2%, most groups could live with the 3%, but reluctantly. The proposed increase in the rates of 6% starting this coming season and to run for 3 years will give us an increase of 18% in 3 years' time. That increase over the previous years of 5% going to increase ice costs with the 1% going back to the reserve fund. This is almost 3 times the going rate of inflation, running at 1.5% last year and currently about 1.8% for this year. Businesses that have increases regulated by the government, they have them based on the rate of inflation. And that's been running at under 2% for the last several years. We would wish that any ice increase in the ice costs be kept at or close to the rate of inflation. The other issue is the proposal to change prime from non-prime ice used by minor sports groups. And currently, ice, prior to 6 p.m., Monday through Friday, is designated as non-prime. The increase that 5 p.m. to 6 p.m. would then be designated as prime ice. This is an increased cost from $95.45 plus HST for non-prime to $139.49 plus HST, which would be an increase of some 55%. And these are programs that we run, Learn to Skate, the young kids that this is normally their first program where they come in and learn to skate. The skaters in these programs are mostly young children, kindergarten to grade 2. This increase would greatly affect these young children from participating in Learn to Skate programs due to this 55 to almost 60% increase in cost. It would definitely be much easier on our younger members if the non-prime ice time continued to run until 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and have the parents and face this possible increase of 55 to 60% cost. We know that there is a lot of unused ice during the day from Monday to Friday, and that discussions have been ongoing between the City of Cambridge and the 3 skating clubs in Cambridge: Preston Figure Skating Club, Hespeler Skating Club, and the Cambridge Skating Club. It's a good starting point to get young school children into an exercise program and learn to skate. This is a program that we'll be bringing school kids in to a designated program in that this will start to use up some of that unused ice during the day, and I believe that this program could be expanded to include more children from schools across the City of Cambridge, giving them the opportunities to learn a great Canadian sport of skating, be it with or without a stick. Thank you. Was there any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Allen. And to the committee, are there any questions of Mr. Allen? Thank you, Mr. Allen. We have one other speaker in relation to this, and then we'll ask staff to address it as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'd like to call Norma Ponce from the also from the Cambridge Skating Club. Mr. Allen.
Just as a point of information, I got an email this morning from Norma. She's a school bus driver. She said she'll be here, but it'll be between 10 and 10:30 due to weather conditions, unfortunately.
Thanks very much for that. Then I'm still going to go out of order, and I'm going to ask Tricia Lewis if you could come and just address the issues in relation to the skating, the ice cost, please.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tricia Lewis, and for those of you who don't know me, I'm the Director of Parks, Recreation, and Culture. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'll proceed with a presentation in relation to the strategy this year within a review of our rates and fee structure within recreation. So we've done a comprehensive look at all of our fees, and certainly speaking more specifically this morning into the fees that pertain to ICE in relation to our minor sports groups. And on the first column there, you see our proposed 2018 City of Cambridge rates. And we do get into some technical terms now, and our partner from the Preston Figure Skating Club referenced that when we talk ICE, we talk about prime hours, we also talk about non-prime, and then in that bottom tier, I'm outlining the fee that is subsidized more heavily by the municipality, and again, in partnership to assist our minor sports groups with the services that they bring to this community and in terms utilizing our facilities. So you certainly see, we certainly support and that greater utilization. Prime time is has been for us a 6 o'clock start up to 11. And upon our review, we did note municipalities have shifted and a response to that, and we see many starting at 5 o'clock. We're using that again as a strategy to ensure we're utilizing our facilities to the best of our ability. We are dark in terms of our utilization again. We have a great deal of challenge from our minor sports groups indicating that they are struggling to get families there by 4 o'clock. They felt 5 o'clock is a reasonable time, and we are seeing uptake, so we thought we needed to respond to that. And by no means was this certainly a response in terms of ever providing hardship. It's certainly about moving into strategies that I guess, better position our pricing structure. Back to this chart, certainly how our teams have done some comprehensive look. And again, these fees are the 2018 fees from our neighboring municipalities, and certainly appreciate to them all of the support that they've given to us, sharing and providing this dialogue. Again, municipalities do approach their subsidies to minor sports groups, not always apples to apples situation. So I'll cite my colleagues in the City of Guelph and the City of Waterloo, who take a strategy of their prime rate and just provide a 50%. So when you're seeing a low fee there and in that minor sport category, that's just their strategy and how they deal with that. I really felt after the work that the staff team in recreation had done, we were certainly poised and well positioned within the field, not behind, but just sort of falling within the middle. Certainly as you move further down the 401, you see some of those changes in pricing fees. We have great relationships with our minors, in particular our ICE sport users, and we've been meeting more regularly with them, primarily this fall. We've had 4 meetings starting in September all the way up to November, and we've been talking about our approaches and policies and utilization as well as fees. So we've communicated quite early to provide transparency and open and trusted dialogue that we were in a position of moving fees in a reflection. But I want to remind Council that ICE fees particularly don't come into effect until September 2018. So for us financially, on our side, we don't see that change or that capture of revenue until that 4th quarter next year. But I really felt comfortable in the dialogue we were having with our sport user groups and the amount of time this was going to be giving our groups to be able to respond to the changes that we felt were needed. Almost certainly reflective of allowing them to finish their current year, allowing time for their groups and boards to dialogue about this and make any adjustments as their current season's wrapped up. If they needed to adjust at their next registration points, they've had lots of notice. So I want to remind everyone, as of January 1st, 2018, all fees are the same. There's no changes to the groups. These proposed changes would come into effect in September. And that's consistent across municipalities. We did that look as well, just to make sure we're in line, and that's just a common practice. It's where the ice season starts, so it's been reflective of that nature and habit. So how we arrived at this is just sort of taking some of the landscape and dialogue that are issues that have been happening within the City of Cambridge, and they've been influencing our budgets, particularly in parks, recreation, and culture. So, and things that are out of our control. We've seen provincial mandates now of increases to minimum wage. We also respectfully have had increases through our staff in the collective agreements, as well as we've been monitoring closely the ever rapidly changing utility costs that are occurring in our facilities. And again, worked closely with finance and our asset management team, as well as our facility managers, really trying to closely monitor the impact that it's having. And as you know, dealing with aging infrastructure, it sometimes is a challenge to find all of the efficiencies that we can. But I know our teams are working closely and doing all that they can to use new opportunities, new grant money and where we can make efficiencies. But unfortunately, these are the increases that the city faces in terms of increases to hydro costs, utility costs, and on average, it is just coming at over 11%. So I'll leave you with that, and certainly open if there's any other questions.
Thanks very much, Tricia. Are there questions of Tricia in relation to her presentation? Mayor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you. And I once upon a time, I used to understand completely the whole issue around ice rentals and so on. Going back to the first slide, if we may, please. The $259.61 for prime hours, is that our cost to cover that, or is that a subsidized
That's
cost?
still subsidized.
How much is the subsidy for that? Like, what would the cost be, roughly speaking?
We'd be closer into that 300, 350 cost in my wholehearted opinion, because that's taking in all costs.
So we're subsidizing.
We still are subsidizing. That's
approximately
just
$75 per hour?
Yeah.
Okay. And a prime hour, and I'm trying to get back to prime hours. What hours are those, essentially?
6 to 11.
Apparently it's 6 to 11. Okay.
It is, and if I can confirm that, it is 6 p.m. to 11. We're asking that it go back at proposal 5 till 10. And again, it was a strategy in terms of budget approach.
And if I look at unfortunately, I compare ourselves to City of Kitchener and Waterloo. And Kitchener has a much lower rate. Is there any reason for that? Can you just sort of, or I'm just interested.
It was very interesting for us to learn that they use an approach and they have their minor sports groups apply to the municipality in order to be recognized as the affiliate organization. And only the affiliate organization receives a preferred rate. So one minor hockey association, one ringette team, one figure skating club, one girls hockey. I think you can see the pattern we're creating. That's an interesting approach for a municipality. I don't know that that's our approach, because we certainly support.
So it's not wide open. So other groups would pay a much higher rate. Am I correct?
Yes, that's correct.
So that's not reflected here
No.
in terms of our comprehension.
So we have it's a challenge when we get into doing but we still need to do that exercise and understanding where fees are. But in the system of municipalities and how we approach and use strategies, we're not apples to apples.
No, I was just going to say that.
So it's sometimes, again, a reflection of the need of the community. I believe what we're doing for our user groups and allowing them the subsidized rate and the support they receive and customer service has been strong.
So that would be for all groups, for instance, in prime hours, they would get the subsidized rate?
For us, the minor sports groups get
the minor
this.
sports
Sports
groups. My
groups.
apologies.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll have to speak to Barry Bosnick about this.
Thank you. And Tricia, if I may, when you said that if I wasn't part of that one sports group in Kitchener, do you know what I would be paying if I belonged to the two or the second sports group?
I think it's, I think what we've put in, is I believe the 145 is what all the groups would pay. It's lower. I think we're at 124 for Kitchener for an affiliate. So we went with the average amount. It's much lower, but it really limits, and it's a application process. It's a different approach.
Thank you. And our prime rate for minor sports is less than the non-prime rate.
No, prime is more.
Sorry.
Yeah.
No, the non-prime rate is 150.
Non-prime is less. Those are reflective of hours that we often are challenged to sell. Not as highly programmable, not as desired. How do I best say that?
I worded that wrong, thanks.
Is that right?
So
Okay.
the non-prime rate is 155, but the minor sport prime rate is 147. And I thought non-prime might be even lower than the prime for sports, but that's not the case. Say that again. We subsidize minor sports. Okay.
We have, again, a lower rate for non-prime minor sport group.
But we don't subsidize non-prime at all.
Yes, if a minor sports group wanted to use non-prime hours, we do have a rate. It is lower than the 147.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
We have a rates and fees document. It's attached with the budget.
Thanks. Mayor Craig.
If I may, just through as a follow-up question, Tricia, are the sports groups and the groups that you sit down and have the conversations with, do they understand all the facets of this that you're explaining to us now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Through you, Mr. Chair, we have had some really good dialogue, and I really used a lot of the same principles that Mr. Fairweather has brought to our team and our knowledge, reminding the groups that sources of revenue for a municipality come through two sources: user fees or tax increases. And I've shared I've been very candid with our groups of the projects, of the challenges within our current 2018 budget, and shared that I was working as a city director to find balance in that, and I was proposing. The groups understood. They are residents here as well as the great volunteers that they are, and the time that they give to their organizations. We did not have, and again, I think today is just reflective of one group, and I certainly respect their concerns being brought forward, but we have not heard the same from our other minor sports groups who have heard this same message.
Great. Thank you very much, Tricia. Any further questions of Tricia?
Right here.
Councillor Devine.
Trish, thank you for your presentation.
Thank you.
You talked about primetime ice being from 6 to 11.
Yeah.
Is there any primetime ice on the weekends through the day?
Yeah. It's
what would those hours be?
It's 8 a.m. till it's almost full day. So it stops in the evening, 8 till 5, 8 till I have to go back to my notes.
Okay, so it actually reverses itself in the weekend.
Yeah, we certainly capture, and the groups know that. That's been standard practice. That's Saturdays and Sundays are prime time for us. Again, what we're seeing is the groups are stepping away in terms of that opportunity to utilize ice 7 in the morning, 7:30, 8. We're seeing more times coming available and the uptake at 9. We've got this block of time sitting, and we've got to be having our groups use those spaces so we better utilize our facilities.
And on the last slide, you put the operational costs of various pads. Why is the Golf Arena Gardens considerably less than the rest of the facilities to operate?
Yeah, I think I'm speaking with staff, I think over the years we've had some other energy efficiency updates. It's amount of the hours that we're utilizing the facility during time. This particular arena does sit dark more and is only operating in the evening. Our other arenas as well started to have some other additional uptake in the summer. So that where we didn't have ice necessarily in at Galt. So again, with the staff and the user groups, we're having a good look at when we're putting in ice, how we're using it during those summer months to best utilize what we're doing going forward.
Okay, so since saying that, some of these, we're kind of mixing apples and oranges here with these figures.
It's just I wanted to make sure that we were being transparent. Every arena is different. This is one of our oldest facilities. It certainly is, maybe it's had some more recent, in the prior years, recent upgrades that is causing it to be more efficient. Probably, again, relation to its operating hours.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Tricia. And I think Norma Ponce, is Norma here? Then I'll ask Norma if you would come forward, please. Norma, if you could just give us your name and address, please.
Norma Points, 272 Blair Road, Cambridge.
Thank you.
I apologize for my lateness, and my voice is, I've got a terrible cold, so I do apologize that you're going to have to listen to my rasping voice. I represent the Cambridge Skating Club, and our board is very concerned about the increase of the 6% over the next 3 years, another 6%. Our ice fees are our largest expense, and there's nothing that we can do to change things or go elsewhere. If you have a large expense, you can try and cut back in some ways, but with ice fees, we're unable to do that. It was explained to us by Tricia that they had done a study and tried to, of the areas around us, surrounding areas, and they wanted to bring Cambridge's rates up to what the other surrounding communities are. We feel that it's not our particular problem, or we're bearing the brunt of that because of that increase, and it's not really our fault that the city hasn't kept up and kept pace with the regions around us. In our view, the city trying to make up for their not doing that, their lack of foresight, in one foul swoop of this big increase is, in our mind, similar to the devastating results that the Wynne Liberal government is doing with the minimum wage, abruptly bringing that up to where it should be, and instead of gradual increments. We're used to increases. That happens, that's life. But in gradual amounts and small increments. This large jump is something that is going to be very difficult for us to put into our budget. It's going to affect our members because we're going to have to pass that down to our skating members. And the sudden increase is a great concern to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Norma. And just before you sit down, are there any questions from the committee of Norma? Thank you, Norma.
Thank you.
Now to the committee, an opportunity for discussion in relation to the ICE fees that have been presented by staff. Any further conversation? Not at this time, then we'll move on to the next delegation, and the next delegation is Mr. Greg DeRocher from the Chamber of Commerce.
Well, I'm not Greg DeRocher. I'm James Goodrum. I'm going to start off first. So I just wanted to give everybody an update on where we're at with the visitor services agreement that we have with the Chamber. The last agreement was a 5-year agreement, and it currently expired at the end of May. And since that time, we've been negotiating with the Chamber CEO as well as his board around a new agreement. And the goal is really to bring the new agreement forward in the new year. One of the things with the old agreement was there was a clause for CPI increases annually. What we're proposing in the new agreement is we've taken an average of the last 5 years CPI increase, and it averaged out to 1.5% annually. So the new agreement is a 3-year agreement with 1.5% annual increases. I think some of the information that was requested was a look at the number of visitors using the centre, and as you can see over the past several years, it has been declining, and that's the number of walk-in visitors to the centre. So just a note there, there's other people that call in, there's people that visit the website, and so on. And this chart here really shows that the majority of the visitors, or the greatest amount of visits, occur during what we'd expect, your typical summer months, July and August being the highest increases. So as I said, with the new contract, it's not only the visitor service center, but it also includes an updated website, as well as making the website mobile friendly, and some of the other services that the Chamber is providing is free Wi-Fi access for visitors within the center. And there's also the center opened in 2001, and there's other services from a tourism perspective that the Chamber offers, not as part of our contract, but some of the other things that they undertake is they create a tourism guide annually to market Cambridge. They conduct tours of Toyota, and I believe they have over 20,000 people attend those tours annually, but that's something that they do with Toyota, as well as they do relocation packages and so on. So from a tourism perspective as well, the city also funds the Waterloo Region Tourism Marketing Corporation on an annual basis. And I guess the final thought is, the Chamber is one of our key partners in, working with us to create business opportunities within the city, as well as provide tourism services. And so with that, Mr. DeRocher is here with me today to answer any questions the committee may have.
Thanks, James. Any questions of James before Mr. DeRocher comes forward? Councillor Devine.
Yeah, with the new contract, what's the annual expenditure with the new contract?
It's I believe it's around $266,000 for the next year, and then at 1.5% increases annually thereafter. So it would be a 3-year term with a renewal for an additional 3 years.
What are we currently paying under the old contract?
Approximately $264,000, $263,000 annually.
Thank you.
Thanks, James. Welcome, Greg.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, task force members, for giving us the opportunity as well. I suppose, James mentioned the current activities, and I think it's notable to understand, and I recognize that there's been some conversation around this, and Councillor Wolf made a comment the other day in which I appreciate and understand, and I we live, eat, sleep, and breathe it 7 days a week, 363 days a year. So it's understandable that, from our perspective, we look at things maybe a little bit different from those who don't live it every day. But her comment basically was, why do we give the Chamber $265,000 for visitor services when people find us on the internet? That's probably really true, because our job and our role is not to go out and market. We used to do destination marketing, and some councillors around the table will recall in 2006 there was a decision to move to a Waterloo Region Tourism Marketing Corporation. So we don't do outbound destination marketing anymore. So we capture visitors that come into our community. So if they're not coming into our community, then we have no way of being able to capture them. Fortunately, thankfully for the internet, I think there has been some certainly some good activity, and we can see nothing but positive going forward. But just so that you understand, when we did do destination marketing, back in 2002, we had 85,000 visitors come through our center that we serviced. In 2003, 100,703 visitors. And progressively, it has depleted because we're now marketing an entire region. Back then, we were marketing Cambridge. And I think it's notable that the services that we provide, and we provide very number of services to even residents of the community. In fact, that's our biggest hit right now, is residents of the community coming in, gathering information on what to do, how to entertain their visiting friends and relatives, and what there is to do in the community. But we also deal with individuals. A lady was in the other day and wanted to go and explore Toronto, and she had no idea. She didn't have a vehicle and wanted to know how could she get to Toronto and effectively get around. We not only gave her information about Toronto, but we arranged for her to get on a GO bus and take GO transportation down to Toronto. We do numerous things like that. We had an elderly gentleman came in from Guelph who moved his wife into a home here in Cambridge, and not only was interested in where he could get some services locally that he required, but also wanted to find an apartment. And so our visitor services staff help him in doing things like that. So it goes beyond the range of just simply being that first smiling face when visitors come into our community. And I think the other thing that's really notable is it's really a direct service for small businesses in our community. That's what we do. When visitors come because they're maybe coming to African Lion Safari or the Butterfly Naturium, generally they're looking for other services to do, whether it's dining, whether it's shopping. And what we're doing is we're sitting there directing them and being that warm and friendly and welcoming voice when they come into the center to help them navigate through the community. Believe it or not, we do the official map of Cambridge every 2 years. And what's really, really interesting is every 2 years, it's my visitor services staff coming to me and saying, we're getting low on maps, it's time to do another map. So while we all have GPS on our phones, and oftentimes travelers utilize their phones for finding different things, different attractions. The fact of the matter is maps, handheld maps, are still important to a lot of people who are commuting and traveling. And I think the other thing is individuals might look for the Butterfly Conservatory, or they might look for African Lion Safari and find their way into Cambridge. When you set that on your GPS, it takes you to African Lion Safari or to the Butterfly Conservatory or to Southworks Antiques. But what it doesn't do is it doesn't give you the rest of the community and the rest of the value of the community. And oftentimes people traveling in an hour or more coming into the community for one of those attractions, they don't want to spend the hour and a half or 2 hours that they maybe do at the attraction. They also want to spend the rest of their day here. And that's where we find our services very valuable and very important. If you look over the years of the economic contribution, because this is an economic development responsibility. This is our ability to be able to translate visits to our community into economic benefit for our community as well. The reality of it is, with almost 1 million visitors served since we opened the gateway in 2001, there's been billions of dollars of economic return to the community in one way or another, and that would represent thousands of jobs that are here as a result of it. So I think, I'm not trying to take any credit from the Chamber's perspective, because it's not the Chamber's credit, it's the community's credit for supporting this type of service, because we are oftentimes the very first face that an individual will see when they come into our community. And we pride ourselves in making sure that that face is happy and friendly and smiling and warm, and utilizing every ounce of effort they can to keep people in our community and spending money in our community. I had a meeting, oddly enough, a week and a half ago with Jackie Phillip, who is the manager of Ontario Travel Centres in the province. And there are 11 Ontario Travel Centres under her management, and there are 2 others that are independent. One is Brantford and one is Cambridge. They regard us as an Ontario Travel Centre. She actually came in, she says, I have to come in and meet you and talk to you, because you are, in her exact words, were, you are the Arctic when it comes to measuring success in visitor services. We have a 5 out of 5 star rating for customer service, quality of information, and cleanliness of our facility. And she wanted to know how we did it. Really, it's testament to the staff that we have out there. They're just incredible people. We're proud to be the #1 Ontario Travel Centre in her portfolio. And in fact, what she also commented on was, we're the only travel centre between Windsor and the Quebec border on 401. So I think there's an opportunity for James and myself, and possibly Mr. Dyke as well, to sit down with the Ontario Tourism Marketing Partnership Corporation and find out if they want to contribute to the success of our centre as well. And I think there might be some opportunity there where the city can partner with the province. From the Chamber's perspective, we're certainly pleased to offer this service. We love meeting the people that come into our community, and we're certainly, we feel privileged to be able to serve them and drive them into our community and spend money. Those of you who have been out to our centre, you know when you go out and leave our centre, there is no left turn. And originally we were a little bit upset with the region because the left turn would give easy access back onto the 401, but we quickly realized that it's probably better from a visitor center perspective to have that, because we can tell people they have to turn right when they go out onto Hespeler Road and drive 5 kilometers and then turn around and come back up, and hopefully they'll spend some money while they're here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Greg. I'm sure the region had that in mind when they reconstructed the highway. I just want to say congratulations. The Chamber is the first point of contact for people coming into our community. And that's such an important first step when people come in, and it contributes to the economic development of our community, it contributes to the vibrancy of our community, and it's all about the people who are there and the interaction that they have with newcomers when they do come to our community. To be the only travel centre on the 401 between Windsor and the Quebec border is quite something. And to be the #1 in Ontario is quite an accomplishment as well. So congratulations on that. Questions of Mr. DeRocher? Councillor Devine.
Thanks, Greg, for your presentation. How many hits do you get on your website annually?
I don't have do you have the data? There are hundreds of thousands of hits. Some of them may be by mistake, but because our website is visitcambridgeontario.com, but there are hundreds of thousands of them, and we offer certainly a quick glance of that, but I think staff and I have talked about modifying it, making it a little bit more accessible, especially from a mobile device.
And what are your hours of operation at the chamber?
9 to 5 through the week, 9 to 5 on Saturday, and 11 to 4 on Sundays.
Okay, thanks.
Mayor Craig.
Just a bit of a comment about the hits on the site. I found it interesting when we were discussing the naming of the Waterloo Region Economic Development Corporation, which was very interesting that when compared to Kitchener and Waterloo, Cambridge had the most hits on the internet. And I thought that was really fascinating. It may come back to what Greg is talking about, but I found it to be extraordinary that in fact was taking place.
There's a tremendous amount of interest around the ecotourism in our community. We're seeing more and more of that. You know, we get lots of questions on access points to get your canoe into the river, access points to the trail. You know, people coming in with bikes strapped to the back of their car and hearing about the fantastic trail system along the river in Cambridge, and that's really big. The other thing that's really big, and something that I'm really happy that the city is starting to really engage in promotion of, is that's the TV shows and the movies and all of the Hollywood type activities that are going on. We oftentimes get American travelers, especially from the U.S. border states, coming in, and they've got their daughters or sons or kids in the car who want to see where Handmaid's Tale was filmed, or want to see where Designated Survivor was filmed, and I think it's fantastic for the community, and our staff are often working closely with the Economic Development Department, making sure that we hand out maps and detailing where the backdrops were for some of these TV shows and movies, and it's surprising the number of people that come in asking about that.
Thanks, Greg. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I'm such a visual person. I find it hard to just hear it. And so I need to go back to the fact that the 264,000 a year plus, I think I heard a 1.5% increase.
Correct.
Each for the next, how many years?
3 years.
Next 3 years. Okay. I got it right. Thank you.
Okay.
I don't see any more speakers. Thanks, Greg.
Thank you.
Next is Linda Terry from the Social Planning Council. Welcome, Linda.
Good morning. On behalf of the Social Planning Council of Cambridge and North Dumfries, board and staff, I request that the City Budget Task Force reconsider the decision to flatline the funding for the SPC in 2018. You are well aware of the excellent and important work and contributions the SPC provides to the City of Cambridge, community agencies we support, and community residents. For the City of Cambridge, we have been asked to sit on the Mayor's Community Outreach Task Force and Advisory Committee. We also participate on the Cambridge Diversity Committee and facilitate the Cambridge Affordable Housing Roundtable. Our 2013 research report led the city to offer incentives for affordable housing development. We also provide backbone support for the Council on Aging. For the Cambridge community agencies, we assist them in interpreting data, including 2016 census data, and provide policy information that may impact their agencies and the people they serve. I've asked that a letter of support from Housing Cambridge be distributed. It just so happened that I was speaking to Steve Garrison, the manager of Housing Cambridge, the morning that I realized that this was being recommended to council about the flatlining, and unsolicitedly he went back to his office and sent me this letter of support and asked me to please bring it to you this morning. As for the residents of Cambridge, we organize community events such as all candidates meetings, which in 2018 will be provincial and municipal in scope. We also host renters' rights forums, which are very important for people in our community that are precariously housed. Considering our experience and reputation, we are asked to bring the voice of Cambridge to regional planning tables, including Wellbeing Waterloo Region. We also are the sole Cambridge representative for Immigrant Partnership Council and the Homeless and Housing Umbrella Group. In 2018, we will be publishing our newly designed Community Trends Report. And pending funding, which we have applied to the Ontario Senior Secretariat, we also hope to provide age-friendly training to the city staff at no cost. Since the City of Cambridge is our only source of sustainable annual core funding, we are continually searching and applying for other sources of funding. We seek out funding from various sources, but this takes staff time, much staff time, but is not always successful. This is the reality of the nonprofit world. As well as over the past year, United Way funding to Cambridge agencies have faced an 18% decrease that has significant impact on our financials. We at this point are applying for another 3-year cycle, but we've been told that there is no guarantee for funding, and this is across the board. In 2011, we were asked by the city to take a 5% reduction in our annual core funding allocation due to financial issues facing the city. We were then surprised to find that we were flatlined for the next 3 years from 2012 to 2014. It should be noted that we had not had this funding reduced in 2010 and then flatlined for 3 consecutive years. Our annual city funding would currently be approximately $125,000 instead of the requested $109,100 for 2018. It is important to note that we are the only local organization providing this level of community research, development, community development, and engagement. The changing face of poverty locally requires us to intensify our work to continue meeting these community needs. This work also requires highly trained staff and sustainable resources. The Social Planning Council of Cambridge and North Dumfries thanks the City of Cambridge for its ongoing support through annual funding, attending our community forums, and actively participating in our planning groups. We respectfully request that the Social Planning Council not be flatlined for 2018, but will receive an annual increase of 3%, which will amount to $109,100. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Questions of Linda in relation to the Social Planning Council? Councillor Reid.
Yes, thank you. I think it's important for us to really understand the value of the work that you provide. So my question is, if we didn't have a social planning council, what effect would that have on the citizens that live in our city?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that we view our work as an independent body. So we're able to advocate on the behalf of the City of Cambridge, which we have over the years, but also really important for our community agencies because they do not have funding to actually pay us to go and to interpret their data or put together a trends report in which they use all the time, and we've had that documented over the years. They would use that for program planning as well as looking for funding sources. So it's really important that way. And also to be able to bring to the community the various pieces that I told you about in regards to all candidates meeting, which I believe over the last couple of elections, we were the only organization hosting those events, and also around the issues of precarious rental situations. And over the years, we've also had our bylaw officer be part of those conversations because a lot of people are in really dire straits when it comes to rental quality housing. So I think that, as I said, there's no other organization locally that provides that kind of information or support to the community.
Thank you, Linda. Seeing no other questions.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
coming. Now I'd like to call on Parmjit Sandra. Welcome, Mr. Sandra, and if you could just give us your name and address, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for the time given to us. I am representing Whitmer Park Association for Seniors. On behalf of Mr. Paramjit Singh, I am the secretary of the association, and I want to bring to your notice certain problems faced by the senior citizens availing that facility what you have provided in Whitmer Park. Around about 250 people are the visitor of that park with their children and the pets, and we are sitting there only on those times when the weather is all right. But 40% of the year we are not able to use that park due to the shelter, because sometimes it is raining, sometimes cold waves are there, sometimes it is ice. And our problem is that confinement in the houses obstruct our health. We want to move on the ground, we want to play something, we want to meet each other. Our problem is like that. So my only humble submission is, you have provided a very great opportunity for us to avail that Whitmer Park. But if the city can provide some shelter, so that at least during the whole year we can go there, we can use that park, and we can avail the facility what you have provided to us. There is no shelter at all, and we have to leave the park as and when the climate is very bad, or even rains are there. So the humble submission is that if there is a recreation center type facilities given, we can use that park for the whole year. And that park is very nicely maintained. We are thankful for the city. And the old people, we people are quite senior citizens, and we have got no opportunity to go in malls or other areas. So my only request is either for senior citizens, children, and the pets who are coming there regularly, they should avail that park for the whole year. And I think whatever you have given the facility, that will be increased throughout the year. And I will be thankful on behalf of the association that you have provided us the opportunity to be out of the house all the year, and we will be quite thankful, sir. Now, the second question is that that Arthur Fack area, there are snow always lying there, and no, removal is not proper. So the second part that I have to request, that somebody should take care of that, so that at least slippery portion should be avoided, because we cannot move on that area if it is not, if the ice is not removed from there. And with these two things, I am thankful to you to give me opportunity for speaking my problems, our association problems, our seniors problem. And I will be thankful if you consider our request.
Thank you, Mr. Sandra. And so what I'm hearing from you is that you would like to see some type of a recreational facility, an enclosed facility within the park so you could use it all year round? Sorry? Just a shelter? Okay. Just a shelter.
Beg your pardon, sir? Shelter, yeah. Shelter with that certain amenities like washrooms, so that the ladies can go there, children, we can have a shelter. That's all, with all the amenities, sir.
Thank you. And are there any questions of Mr. Sad? Mayor Craig.
I'm sorry, which park is it you're talking
This is, sir, in Whitmer Park. Whitmer Park
Whitmer,
is
okay.
it is an author fair, and that is very nice park. We are availing of facilities, but when the rains come, when the cold waves are there, and if we have to take a shelter, we are not available. It is not available, and that's why we are always confined to our houses. And our problem is that we want to walk on the bigger areas. So if you can provide us, it will be a great opportunity for the seniors and other members of the community who are living there, sir. And everybody has this problem. And we are a regular visitor to that park. But due to these problems, we cannot sit there.
Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. Any further questions of Mr. Sadra? Councillor Amata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have a few comments I'd like to make, just a few general comments. So when would be appropriate to do that? I'll leave it up to you since you're chairing the meeting.
Thank you. And any other comments or questions in relation to Mr. Sadra and his presentation? Thank you, Mr. Sadra.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Councillor Amata.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I do represent the area that Whitmer Park is located in. And in that neighborhood, there's almost 1,000 homes. Most of them don't have very big backyards. You know, we talked the other night about basketball nets on the street. Well, in that neighborhood, almost every house has one because there's no basketball courts in that neighborhood. They got to go to Saginaw Parkway. That's the closest net. So, you know, they were talking about facilities right now. There's no shelter there. There's a few trees. And otherwise, there's picnic tables out in the open. And then there's the playground. But there are no soccer fields or ball diamonds. You know, like I think a school initially was supposed to be built, but that got changed. And I know that's nothing to do with council. That's the board, right? But I think compared to other neighborhoods, they fall short for that reason. And I would just like to see something more done with this park over time. I know budgets are tough. I know that there's a process, but nothing major has been done to that park since it was constructed. And I remember back when Councillor Wedham represented the area, she had the same concerns. And I would just like us to move forward on this, to find ways to get this done over time. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mayor Craig.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm in agreement with Councillor Amata, but I think the way to handle it is to ask staff to sit down with Councillor Amata and the group and come up with a concept plan of what they're specifically talking about, and then get it costed out and then bring it back to council. You know, we may not get it this year, but you'll get it if, in fact, we do it in a progressive step. I agree with the community. I mean, on all my years, I've never had a group come in to ask to have some shelter in a park. I mean, it's a very simple request. I think it's one we can accede to, but I think we have to do it in the proper steps. So, Mr. Chair, can we use that as direction, perhaps, Mr. Bromberg and with Councillor Amata and the group to get together and discuss this, okay?
And I'd be willing to do that. That sounds like a good step.
And come back with something, okay?
Sounds good.
Absolutely. So thank you, Mayor Craig. What we will do is give that as direction to staff and to Councillor Amata to meet with the group and determine what it is that would be suitable for this location, and then come back to council after meeting with staff and making a presentation in relation to what would be appropriate for Whitmer Park and for the needs of the community. Folks, we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we'll be back at 10 to 11. So I'd like everybody to be back at 10 to 11, please.
Answer the list. I can't remember that kind of stuff. Hey, just a plain one. I don't want anything fancy. Okay, no cinnamon, no swirls, no.
I'm going to ask the committee to come back together. It's great to have this conversation and dialogue that takes place outside of the committee, so that's great. We do have one other delegation before we get into further conversation, and Mr. Brad Walker is here, and I'd like to ask Mr. Walker to come forward and make his presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your indulgence in my last-minute delegation. My name is Brad Walker. I live at 11 Ridgewood Crescent, Cambridge, Ontario, and I'm here to talk just briefly about the pools and just to highlight just some information for you, which I looked up. And I just looked at the city's website, which is very factual, I hope. In 2001, the city's population was 110,000. At that time, the city operated 6 swimming pools. Kinsman Soper Park, Hancock, Pool in Riverside Park, Ed Newland's Pool, John Dolson, and W.G. Johnson, which makes for 6 pools, 18,000 residents per pool. Not a bad number. In 2018, if council decides to close both Hancock and Kinsman Soper Park, the population will be probably a little over 129,000. We're going to be down to 3 pools. That's per population per pool of 43,000. That doesn't seem to be very progressive to me. Actually, it seems quite regressive. The other question I guess I would have asked, or would ask if I was council, is in other communities, what are they doing with their outdoor pools? I don't believe they're closing them all. And I recognize there's cost to keep them open. And I recognize that they're limited in use, simply for the summer. But until the city is moving forward for another aquatic center of some sort, I think it's hasty to look at closing those 2 pools in the city. I think it reflects poorly on anybody looking to come to the city and looking at recreation facilities as an option. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions of Mr. Walker? Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Walker, are you aware of the usage of the 2 outdoor pools that we are suggesting that may be closed?
The usage?
Yes.
I know, well, I use the 1 pool, and so there's a little bias on my part, there's no question about it, but I can also use the indoor pool. I use it all winter. I recognize that they're not as well used as they used to be. I used to work at those pools eons ago. I won't go back into that, I'm too old. But I know that the day camp that operates out of Soper Park uses the Kinsman Pool. And it's close and handy for them. And so often at the end of noon hour swim, you'll see 50, 60, 70, 80 students from that day camp come in with their camp counselors. Perhaps they can expand that. I'm not sure.
I'm not sure which they that would be who would do it, but currently the usage of the pool is only at 8%.
And I recognize that number as well, and I recognize the indoor pools are only at 13%. But I don't know what the usage, I guess, for things such as the arenas, the library, the splash pads. I don't know what those usages are. I don't know whether you can calculate them. So is it an area, or is it an issue across all recreation facilities, or just an issue across the pools?
Well, those questions will certainly be answered by our recreational staff, but if I were to make a stab at it, I would say that certainly the usage in all of our recreational areas, particularly in arenas, is up. And if you want to talk to the library, well, it is extremely well used.
That's, I don't know what the numbers are. I don't have the stats for me.
Mayor Craig.
Well, just to sort of pipe into this, and I appreciate you coming here, and I think it speaks well of yourself in terms of wanting to be involved. Well, I wish we had more citizens like that, but there was a survey done, I think, about the use of facilities in Cambridge, and the most popular were libraries, 75% of the public. And 50% were into arenas and pools and so on. Are you suggesting then that we keep them open for, let's say, 2 years till we get to the capital point of investing, and then say to people, while we're building a new aquatic center and we're going to shut them down? Would that be a preferable way?
I would think that would make sense to me.
Okay, now you realize where our budget is this year. We're at 5% right now.
I recognize that.
Okay. And for a number of reasons that we, not that they're completely out of our control. I mean, we don't have to put a fire station into, we did have an option not to do it, but we have an obligation on safety to do it. So there's things like that. So 5%, keep the pools open. Is that your position?
I would suggest that the pool should stay open. I don't know whether 5% is a fair tax increase for the public, but I would think
I'm putting you a bit on the spot, but we're on the spot trying to deal with it. You know what I mean?
I recognize that, but you're elected to be on the spot. I'm not.
Well, yeah, good point. I'll think about that next time. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mr. Walker.
Thank you.
Just as a bit of an update now from yesterday, Mr. Dyke and I had the opportunity to meet with the library board because last week we had talked about how we could look at different ways in trying to reduce our budget. And I wanted to report to you that we were very well received by the library board, and we had a very good meeting with the board, and we talked about a number of things, and they are active partners in helping us to reduce the budget at the city level, and they have taken a leadership role, and they've come back to us and said that they can come up with $125,000 reduction in their budget for 2018. So I wanted to share that with you, and I wanted to further let you know that there's potential for further reductions that they will work with the city in seeing what can be done in years down the road. So I thought that was very positive, and it really identifies the relationship that we have with the board and with the library, but it also identifies their desire to help us as we look at this as a global issue for the city in trying to reduce our budget. So again, we're very thankful for that, and thankful for the way the library has participated in reducing their budget by $125,000 as we move forward. The other things we have to talk about this morning are the cost of living initiative that we had talked about last week, and about the pools. Those are two outstanding issues that we need to talk about, and I'd like to put those on the floor now and see what discussion there is around the horseshoe to talk about, and we'll talk about the pools first. So we've got the Hancock and Soper pool that are still up for debate. And before we get started, I'll just ask Mr. Fairweather to update us a little bit on where we stand.
Thank you. Through the chair, the slide in the package that was given out, we ended the last budget meeting at 4.94%. Subsequent to that meeting, there was a arbitrated settlement that was received in regards to the fire department. And as a result of that settlement and some of the trending that's happening when we readjusted for the fire wages, there's about $207,000 in savings. Plus, when we went back and looked in the city managers, we found that there was a schedule that didn't add up to the number that was put in the budget. So we've corrected that for 11.6. So with those two changes, we're presently sitting at 4.67%. The items, as the chair has referred to, is the decision still needs to be made on the non-union COLA adjustment. We've left that in at 0.75, which would save $133,200. You just talked about the library administration reducing from 300 to 125, which will cause the bottom rate to increase. And there's the decision on the outdoor pools still to be provided direction back to staff on. So with that, I'll turn that back to the chair.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Mr. Fairweather before we get started? Mayor Craig.
Now, just looking at this, so if we go to 1% on the COLA, what would that bring it up? We're at 4.67. I just got to get an idea of where we're at, what's happening. What approximately would that be, putting COLA back in at 1%? Because our non-union people are important, and we got to be as supportive as possible.
Through the chair, if you were to change the COLA to a 1% increase for all members of the non-union group, it would save about 89.7. The library adjustment at 125, and still remaining with the closure of the two pools, we'd be at 4.27%.
And if in fact we leave the pools open, where are we?
We'd be at 4.41, roughly.
That's what we do. I'll look for it a second.
Further questions? Councillor Devine.
Last meeting we had, there was discussion on the 0.75% increase for non-bargaining unit people. And I did bring up the fact that people that were in the lower scale, I believe the figure that I heard, the lowest wage was about $45,000, varies from $45,000 to a couple $100,000. I did ask that we have a look at only reducing people that were over $100,000. Is that on here anyway? Right?
Just, Jonathan's going to pull it up, but can you pull your mic down just a little bit? Thanks. And Mr. Fairweather, if you can address that for us, please.
Thank you. Through the chair, we were asked to look at a few different options of the COLA adjustments for the non-union group. And at the end of my comments, I'll ask Mr. Bush to make a few comments. If we looked at what was in the budget, we had all the non-union group, there's about 149 members, would receive 0.75%. It would be a savings of about $133.2. We were then asked to look at if we did it for anybody in the bargaining group that was receiving less than $50,000, it'd be about $131.2. And down below is the number of employees that are impacted in each of those decisions. If we looked at doing the 1.5 COLA for anybody $75,000 and under, it would result in a savings of about $120,002. If you looked at doing it for the bargaining group of anybody greater than $100,000, it would save about $78.3. And I'll turn that over to Mr. Bush to make a few comments.
Through the chair. Our pay band for the non-union group, there's 15 grades, and each grade is separated by 13 steps. And those steps are equal increments. The pay band, if adjusted, if you adjust specifically at certain levels, it will throw the pay band out of sync. So the increments are equal between the 15 levels. So if we start to add in or subtract from either one of those 15 levels, it creates a pay equity issue. So the recommendation is if there's going to be an increase or a decrease, that it's equal across the 15 grades. Because if not, it will open us up to some pay equity issues.
So what you're saying is that it's all or nothing to prevent any of those pay equity issues from arising?
Correct.
Thank you. Further questions? Mayor Craig, did you have a question?
Well, I was going to suggest we go with 1% across the board. Okay? I think that's the best way. I mean, folks, we got to come up with some compromises here. We can sit all morning, talk about it. I think the pool should be closed. However, I know council's feelings on this, and we're not going to close the pools. So what I'm suggesting is we leave it open, but we make it very clear to the public that in 2 years we're closing them, because we have to come down the road in 2 years with capital costs that we can't afford, that don't make sense to invest. When in fact we'll be looking at the new aquatic center under construction and pretty well on its way, regardless of where it is. Okay? So I'd like to see us, and I reluctantly say that with the pools, but I think it's obvious to me that council wants to keep it open. So if we leave the pools open, we do the 1%, I believe that takes us, what was it, 4.41? 4.41.
So just so that we stay on the same page, we're talking about the pools right now, and we'll deal just with the pools then, because I don't want to lose what you said about the COLA either.
Yeah, well,
So
I'm just
let's
throwing out
deal-
a package deal for council, for committee here, okay?
Let's deal.
All right, I'll do with the COLA.
Oh, okay.
So moved, Mr. Chair.
Do I have a seconder? What, Mr. Price? So the motion on the floor is that the COLA be changed from to 1% increase for all non-union members across the board.
That's correct.
Discussion. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I have a lot of reluctance doing this, and I've thought about this for a long time, and it's very difficult for me to say, well, I'm not going to give the COLA because of our budgetary reasons. I can accept that, people don't receive monies in their salary packages because it's based on their skill level, it's based on their seniority level, but based on budgetary, that doesn't sit well with me. I just find that very difficult to accept. I find it very difficult to accept that if we approve this, we're setting up one section of our employees that is different than another section, and it's not something that I would support. Certainly, in my past life as a negotiator, I would never have supported anything like that. I also recognize that sitting on a management type position, which I have done also in negotiations before, you have to take a different tack from time to time. I probably can live with the fact that of 1%, but I just felt necessary to explain that for me, there wasn't a really good reason for me to treat this group of employees differently. I just find that hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Mr. Shepsky.
Mr. Chairman, is there a time that I have some comments that I wanted to bring to the committee here, and when can I do that? I don't want to interrupt your schedule that you're embarking on that I can see, but I've been sitting here kind of patiently this morning, and I've been wanting to say a few things that I think need to be said.
So what we'll do, thank you, Mr. Shepsky, what we'll do is we'll deal with the COLA issue that we have on the table or on the floor right now, and we'll deal with the pools, and then we'll come back to your comments, because I want to make sure that we include all those comments, but we do have two issues that we need to deal with before we get to that point. So the item on the floor is 1% across the board for non-union members. And thank you for your comments, Councillor Reid. Any other comments? Mayor Craig, your mic is on. Are you...
I've moved the motion. I have a seconder. I'm on my way here. Okay.
Then I'm going to call. I'm going to call the vote. Those in favor? Motion's carried. Those opposed? Sorry.
All right. With regards to the pools, I'm going to move the motion, and I can't commit the next council to 2 years, but I think what we ought to do as a council is to leave the pools open this year and suggest that in 2 years, through our staff informing the public that they will be closed, because that's the intent of this council in the future, to close the pools, because we'll be moving to a new aquatic center. So the motion on the floor essentially is to leave the pools open. All right?
Thank you. So I have moved by Mayor Craig and seconded by Councillor Devine that the two pools remain open. And are we taking this 1 year at a time?
We can only take it 1 year at a time.
So we're taking it 1 year at a time. Any comments? Councillor Devine.
No, I think that's a wise move to keep those pools open for the short term. Okay, and it's very important that we let the residents know in the future that they will be closed, instead of all of a sudden we come to budget time, they're going to be closed. Because people have to prepare for that. And we will be building an aquatic center. And in the short term, those pools need to remain open. Now, I do have a question, maybe to Mr. Fairweather. Now, my understanding, the reason we're closing those pools is they're near the end of their lifespan. That's my understanding. Is there going to be any large cost incurred to keep those pools open for another year or two? Is there any major repairs need to be done?
So I'm going to turn that question over to Tricia Lewis, please.
I'll support your 3,000. The rest of council's going to go for it.
So, thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, we do have listed some of the capital that needs, but to my knowledge, we still have a sanitary line issue at Soper Park that is unfunded, and I would have to bring back something to council to ensure that that project gets brought forward. We were able to mitigate it in this prior summer. It's not sustainable if we go with this model being proposed. I just have to be able to address that issue specifically.
That's good. We know that, so that's good. Going in, we know that.
That
Thank
cost we have an estimate is of 150 to 200,000.
Mayor Craig?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Okay, sorry. It will be capital.
Any further questions of Tricia? Thank you, Tricia. So the motion on the floor is to keep the two pools open for 2018. Any further discussion? Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, it's not my usual style to be this negative, but I'm afraid that this morning I am more on that side. I have difficulty supporting this motion. When that pool, both of those pools are only used to 8% of their capacity, it tells me that the community isn't making use of those pools, that they don't see that need. It isn't a need for them. It isn't. We're not doing anything to really help that community a great deal by keeping them open. Now I find out that if we keep Soper pool open, we're looking at up to $200,000 that we're going to have to spend on that pool before next summer, before we can open it next summer. And then we don't know. I mean, we know they're aging. What other things may happen? We don't know. But we could be facing other costs as well. I mean, if I found that the kids in that community were all using that pool even to 50%, but 8%, that's all they're using? How can I justify that? How can I turn around to people who find it difficult to pay their taxes that I'm going to keep this pool open because those people who live in that area would like it open? when they're only using it to 8% of its capacity? I just don't know how I can justify that, so I will not be speaking, or I will not be voting in favor of keeping them open.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Mayor Craig.
Yeah, I'm sorry. With the further information, and I think Councillor Devine put us on the right track here, and it was my understanding it would be 2 years from now. I'm going to withdraw the motion. I think the best we're going to be able to do now, in terms of if we want to look at the situation, is to look at only at keeping one open, but I can't justify keeping Soap Bar open for 2 years with a $200,000 capital expenditure.
Thank you, and I know...
so the motion's off the floor.
Thank you, and I'd ask Tricia if you would, you're getting your exercise, if you could just come forward and further clarify that for us. Is there a way that, I hate to ask if we can limp through, but I'll let you explain. How can we best deal with the situation knowing what we want to try to achieve?
Through you, Mr. Chair, there's always a way. Our staff are resourceful and talented, and as they proved this summer, they found a solution that just mitigated, but it wasn't, we were able to keep it operating. For us, it's not a long-term solution. We could go back just to exploring that, and then within these boundaries, see how long we could. I can never predict, as we've seen, if there was something that was more of a failure, then we would have to just bring that forward and proceed. But I always believe staff are resourceful. We will work with our contractors, and we can find some way.
Thank you, Tricia. We really wanted you to predict, but I'll get Mr. Dyke to further clarify things.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm not going to predict either. The only thing I'd add to Ms. Lewis's comments is that we can try the mitigation measure going forward if that's as our council given them. However, stating that if we were to determine that was becoming problematic, then we would be coming back to that we would be closing the pool. Just on that understanding. So it may end up with as a mid-year thing, depending on what happens and the reports we're getting back from our inspections, but that would kind of be the middle ground, I would think, Mr. Chairman.
Thanks, Mr. Dyke. And Councillor Devine.
I'm sure that city staff is very resourceful. There's no doubt about that. We have some very, very talented people working here for the city. Yes. I've seen them pull some stuff off in a big hurry. That, I'm going to remake the motion that we keep the pools open. And I would like Mr. Craig, if you'd be able to second it. If down the road, come January, February, that Parks and Rec people come back and say it's going to be $300,000, then we're going to have to make that decision. We're going to have to make that decision at that time. I can't see it being $200,000 or $300,000. Sanitary lines, my understanding. So I would like to make the motion. We keep those two pools open. And I'd like a seconder. And then the city staff can come back in January or February and say, we got a bigger problem we thought. But right now, we don't know.
Mayor Craig.
Well, I'll put the motion on the floor, seconded, with the understanding that if it comes back with capital costs, then we have, and the public knows that right now.
That's right.
That there's a possibility.
Yes.
Okay? And secondly, that the public is clearly informed of the wishes of this council to close the pools in 2 years regardless. Okay?
Absolutely.
All right.
So we have a motion on the floor that we keep the two pools open, and should a major capital expense or major repair come forward, that staff would bring that to us, and we would make the decision at that time whether we would close the floor. Is that correct?
Yes.
And this would be a transition from pool to the aquatic center that we are eventually going to build. So the motion on the floor is to keep the pools open. Further discussion? I'm going to call the question then. Those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried.
Good friend.
So the other item that was still left pending was the COLA. And I think, Mayor Craig, you had talked about a 1% across the board.
Sorry. Did we vote on that?
I'm behind. I'm a little behind. So I just want to clarify what we've done then. So during conversation with the library, we've been able to glean $125,000 saving through the library board. We talked about the COLA, and we're at 1% across the board, and I think it's important that we do give a cost of living increase to non-union staff, because a pay increase demonstrates our acknowledgement of value to people, and to give nothing, I think, sends a terrible message. So I'm glad to see that we have that 1%, and we've agreed that we're going to leave the 2 pools open, and that we'll take it day by day for repairs, but the 2 pools will be open for the year 2018.
So, Mr. Chair, we're still at 4.41, am I correct? Yep.
I'll ask 4.41. And now I'm going to ask Mr. Shepsky. I know, sorry, just before I get there, George, I'm Councillor Reid.
Well, I did want to bring forward a motion on the Social Planning Council, and you can direct me as to when that would be appropriate.
Right now.
Yes, now would be fine.
Now would be fine. Good. Yes, I would like to grant the request from the Social Planning Council, and so that they would get the additional that they asked for, and rather than flatlining. And in speaking to that, I have worked fairly closely with the Social Planning Council, and I know a lot of the work that they do. I know they're not frontline, and it's really difficult because they don't do frontline work with the poor or the low-income people, or that, but they provide all kinds of information for those who do. So it's the groups, the nonprofit groups, who do work with housing and with low-income people, with homelessness. They are the people that go to the Social Planning Council to get the data that they require in order to be able to apply to different organizations for grants. And if that Social Planning Council wasn't there, there would be a huge hole. I know we're not suggesting that we take it away. However, we are the group that helps them to become sustainable. We are the group that uses their services to a great degree, because they are the ones who help with all the social ills within our community. And as Ms. Terry mentioned before, you know, we turn to them when there are problems. We turn to them when we had the opioid crisis. We turn to them when we have a housing shortage. We turn to them so many times when we have issues that we don't know how to deal with. Their trends report is a report that is used by so many people within our community, including this council. And so it seemed to me that they showed the value that they bring to this city, and the value that we receive as a city, and from the work that they do, and that the modest increase that they have requested is one that I would like to support. And so I'm looking for a seconder to my motion.
Mayor Craig seconds that, and now we're open for discussion. Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Social Planning Council does a lot of great work in this community. Have done for a number of years. It's not like the Social Planning Council is not receiving any funding from the city. What we're talking about here is 3% increase, is what we're talking about. We have all kinds of nonprofits out in the community that virtually get nothing from the city. The situation that we're faced with in this budget, we have reduced the grants for groups by 25%. Social Planning Council is not looking to lose any money at all. We're talking about a 3% increase. I can't agree with the 3% increase. I cannot agree with it. I mean, I understand the work they do in the community, and they do wonderful work in the community. Yeah, they're funded to the tune of over $100,000 a year. So I cannot support the increase.
Thank you. Councillor Amata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, through you, I certainly agree with a lot of Councillor Reid's comments in the sense that the Social Planning Council does bring a lot of value to the community, and they've been very helpful, and they've been able to champion a lot of causes and and help get positive change in the community. The thing I'm very concerned about, though, is I'm really concerned about this tax increase, and as Councillor Devine said, we did cut back for other groups. And I mean, this is very difficult for me, leaving them at what they got last year, but what choice do we have? People are struggling in the community, we all know that. And I mean, I don't want to be cold-hearted or, use the knife on them or anything, but, I think we need to leave them at what they got last year, like not cut it, but flatten it. So, I mean, it's not an easy decision for me to make, but I'm really concerned about this tax increase, and I'm just going to leave it at that. I do applaud them for the work they've done. I'm sure they're all going to continue to do a lot of other excellent things for the community, but we're all struggling right now, and we have to find savings, and it's not easy.
Thank you. Further questions? Further comments? Then I'll call the question. The motion on the floor is to increase the Social Planning Council. Those in favor? Those opposed? The chair is opposed. One item before George. I know I'm going to get to you, George. The one item that we didn't put on the floor was a motion to accept the $125,000 from the library. And so I'd...
Want to move that?
I'd ask Mr. Price if you would move that motion.
I don't think he does it happily, Mr. Chair.
Seconder? Mayor Craig? Comments, questions? George?
Mr. Chair, what was that about?
That was the $125,000 that the library has agreed to reduce their budget by. Any other comments? Those in favor? Those opposed? The motion is carried. I think what I want to do now, Mayor Craig, did you have a... George, I wanted to give you the opportunity. So, George, you had some questions that you wanted to ask, some statements that you wanted to make?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The last meeting we had, when we got together, certain things were left hanging, and through that process, I sent out a facsimile to a question to everybody in the room. Had to do with marketable securities and the fact that we have a market value that's less than the book value of these marketable securities. I did get a response back from Mr. Fairweather that he explained the situation that he has to deal with day to day. But I'm looking at the situation we've got. It just begs more issues to the whole thing. When I look at what our cost of our mortgage cost is, it's about 3 times what we make on return on these investments. And if there was a time that we had to draw on these investments because of the type of investments we have, well, we could be out of luck. Right now, our book value is, on an average, $500,000 less for the last 2 years than we've seen. I did request interim financial statements, which I think when I see how this process is going on here, I see how this budget process is presented to councillors. I think it's misleading, as best to say. Without seeing the financial statements or the interim statements that we have and understanding those, and the council understanding what those financial statements say, I think there's some policies that have got to be looked at and some education of councillors has to take place. We have a city that has resources. We're not destitute. There's lots of things we can do. We just need to, we need to have maybe somebody who knows how to make investments, a reputable investment manager to look at these things, so we're not looking at situations where our market values are less than our book values on our investments. I mean, it just doesn't make sense. I look at the cash position we have. I showed these figures to my wife, and she's not an accountant type. And she said to me, like, you've got $50 million in the bank, and we got a loan of $25 million. Why don't we clear the loans off? Like, why are we doing this? I look at our cash position year over year in the last year, went up over $900,000. Our cash position. Come on, folks. We have resources. We have liquidity. We're going around and hammering a bunch of organizations around town, hammering our pools and other situations. We have this ability on hand. When we go about the process that we're doing here, by setting out what is a staff-generated budget as opposed to a taxpayer-generated budget, I think we're going around the wrong way.
Thank you, George.
I'm not done yet.
Just in relation to a couple of the comments that you've made, I have great confidence in staff and the way in which they present the budget. And the Municipal Act has very specific guidelines in how we do things. And we have no choice but to follow the Municipal Act. And I take exception to us hammering organizations within the city and our partners within the community, because we don't hammer them. We work with them and we do the best that we can. And we're not trying to drag something out of somebody. We're trying to work with our partners to get the best we can for the taxpayer, because at the end of the day, the taxpayer is paying the bill. And we know that our investments did not receive what you thought they should have received, and you brought that to our attention, and I'm glad you did. And Mr. Fairweather explained that very well. And I have to tell you, I have every confidence in staff and the way that they have prepared the budget. So I need to make those comments before we move forward, because I want to make it clear that staff have the responsibility to make sure that the funds are in reserved accounts are there and they stay there. Staff have the responsibility to create a budget that they can present to council and to make sure that council understand it. And staff have done that. And then council takes that budget and has to review it with this committee and then back to council for approval. So I need to make those comments before we move on, because I want to make sure we understand that staff have done a good job. They've done a great job. And this has not been an easy process for any of us, because we all realize that at the end of the day, the person who is affected by it is our taxpayer. So having said that, I'm going to let you continue. I know you've got a couple of other things you want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Okay, going back where I got cut off, I'm sorry. Looking at the reserves, our reserves increased, and I'm looking 15 over 16 because I haven't seen the current figures. And if we had the current figures, I'd maybe be able to comment more intelligently on things. And I don't know why it should be a problem. I mean, this organization, the city, has a set of records that could be printed off just instantly, and we could have that. We know what these figures are that would be available. But anyway, reserves increased by 7 million. I think every reserve that we have some reserves called other. We have reserves that are called general government, like $2 and $3 million. We've got set aside in these things. What's in that? Every councillor should have a full and transparent discussion on that and understand what has been set aside. What we've set aside monies for those reserves, monies that we may not be able to get what we have set aside for them because of the way we've arranged things, but we need to understand what goes into that. I'd like to know, we have tax arrears. I'd like to know, I think the staff should show some accountability why we have tax arrears of $7 million. Let's do something about that. The last meeting we had here, Councillor Leggett came up, and she came up with ideas that in her particular area that she operates under, she had savings from $100,000 to $155,000 of savings, that things could be postponed or done another time. I challenge every councillor to look at what they have in their particular areas and what savings could be made. So when we come to a meeting like this, we've got the taxpayer focused on totally and say, we want to help the taxpayer. That's our job at the end of the day. Nothing else.
I'm going to cut you off there, George, because you've asked a number of questions, and I want to make sure we answer these questions. And so I'm going to ask Mr. Fairweather just to speak about you talked about $7 million in reserves and in other and general that had between $2 and $3 million. You talked about $7 million in tax arrears, and the other thing is you talked about councillors finding areas within their area of responsibility to find savings. Sometimes that's difficult to do because those might be capital projects that you can put off. But I'm going to ask Mr. Fairweather to address those first questions that you've asked.
Through the chair to Mr. Shepsky, these questions that you've raised now have been answered in the previous meeting for you as to the rules and regulations that we have to follow. I even provided you with the Municipal Act sections of the rules regarding investments. The type of investment you're asking us to go into, we're not eligible to invest in. We don't invest in mortgages. We can hold a mortgage, but we don't go out and buy a mortgage. We're also restricted from commercial paper, which was previously explained to you as to that. As for the market rates fluctuates. If I buy a stock today, it may go up, it may go down. It's a snapshot in time. The only time you realize a loss on your marketable securities is when you dispose of them. The investments that we are holding have been matched time to the need from the reserved funds to fulfill the obligations, which again is a statutory requirement that we must follow. So the questions you're raising have been answered to you. The details of the reserves and reserve funds are brought before council every term of council. There was a report that was brought public, which is available publicly on the city's website through the agendas, that details out each reserve fund as to how it's funded, how it's utilized, and what the purpose of it is.
Mr. Chair, I don't think Mr. Fairweather and I are going to see eye to eye on some of these issues. I think I understand the rules that maybe he is constrained with, or this councils have, or the cities has to be constrained with, but there must be other ways to look at things. Again, when I look at the financials and I see the equity that we have on our financials, and we can use this equity in other ways, and we could go ahead and bring the increase to the taxpayers to zero. That's what we should be doing. That should be our goal, not to go increasing it. And if we went ahead and to the councillors and gave them the education on what we have in our financial statements, and they would understand what's in those financial statements, then the whole budget process would be a little different and more informed. Thank you.
Thanks, George. And I'm going to ask you a question now. How could we use those equities? Can you give us some examples? You talked about the equities that we have and how they could be utilized.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to tell you that I don't know the regulations that Mr. Fairweather is referring to, but I'd be glad to look at them. I'd like to, I'd like to see what other cities do. They have to deal with those same sort of regulations. I see that our tax base and the taxes we pay here are more than Kitchener, Waterloo, and that to me says there's a problem. And somehow they're doing things differently than we're doing things differently. So somehow things can be looked at again, I say with due respect, when my wife looked at the financials and saw we have $50 million of cash sitting around, that we increased by almost $1 million year over year. And when I requested the current figures, what we have, which should be, you should be able to snap them off very quickly, and I haven't received those. I think something is going wrong.
Thank you.
It's not huge, but something's going wrong.
I'll let Mr. Dyke address that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Mr. Shefsky, I mean, this is similar to Mr. Fairweather's comments. This is going to be a repeat of what I've said over the previous 2 days. Council has all the information available to us they receive with respect to the budgets and the city's finances. There is no information that is being withheld from council. There is no misleading of council with respect to the financial information, and to intimate otherwise is irresponsible. We are currently following the regulations that we have, and to your last point, we are fully aware of what the regulations are with respect to what we can and cannot do with money, and we're being followed. We follow the same protocols as other municipalities in the province of Ontario, to the point which, as I mentioned last weekend, our financial staff has been recognized through the government financial associations of both Canada and internationally for the excellence of which they provided information to both the public and council. So the full disclosure is there. The full disclosure of all the information is there, and we function within that information. So nothing is going wrong. Do other municipalities function differently with respect to how they budget and how they spend? Absolutely. Decisions of council are made based on the needs of the municipality and the investment desires of the individual council and the needs of the municipality. That is what you're seeing reflected in our budget. As explained numerous times before, if you look at our budget right now at the 4.41%, which was the committee is currently considering passing on to council, approximately 1.1% or 1.2% of that is increased operating within the city. The balance of the increase is a result of capital investment by this council for the needs of the community. So when you take that into context, even with respect to the city, take it a business or industry, you do have times where you have to make capital investments within your operations that will have an impact on, to use the term, your bottom line. We are currently within one of those years with respect to the new library going in, Station 6 going in, and eventually we'll be dealing with, in subsequent council years, we'll be dealing with the multiplex of the recreation facility. Those are all investments in our community. Because we have a rate that's increased, should no way be interpreted by anybody that anything untoward is happening or we are not doing our jobs. Council has been very good in this budget, and you can see, and they're very concerned about the community by the discussions we're having, and that's what we're going forward. I don't know how else to explain that further. As we've said all along, you're more than welcome to come in and actually have a conversation with Mr. Fairweather and I to address it so you understand more clearly what the regulations we are under are, and they're not the same as the private sector. And there are some pitfalls other municipalities have gotten into on the investment side. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And Mayor Craig, I know you have a statement, comment you want to make.
You know, George has talked about comparison to Kitchener and Waterloo, but it's not a comparison because it's not apples to apples in many respects. And I've mentioned this time and time again about stormwater management. We could reduce the budget 1% and send out bills monthly on stormwater runoffs on various properties. That's what Kitchener and Waterloo do. But we haven't done that. It's part of the overall budget. So if you were to make that comparison, we're not at 4.401, we're at 3.401. That's essentially where we are. And if you want to look in terms of comparing them again, they have greater assessment over the last couple of years. And a lot of that, and it's been said publicly by the region and by members of Kitchener and Waterloo Council, it's attributed to the LRT going through their community. Waterloo's at, I think, 3.5% assessment. We're at 1%. And we're helping to pay for that in terms of our regional taxes. So they have those benefits we don't have at this particular time. The city of Kitchener has a gas plant. They get huge revenues off that every year that helps to deal with their particular budget. And then, of course, you could look at Waterloo and Cambridge being essentially the same size with regards to population, but geographically, we're much bigger. So we have more fire stations, as an example, more road networks, things like that, which cost more. So these are the things that make the comparisons very, very difficult. There's no two municipalities you can really compare. I had an individual call me and say, well, you know, why aren't you like Toronto where you can have low tax increases? And I said, well, I'll tell you why. Because I don't get land transfer tax and John Tory does. That's another reason you can't make these comparisons. So you have to be very careful about what we're doing here and how we're portraying this. I think the other thing too is Mr. Dyke, Mr. Fairweather, and Tricia all come forth and they give proposals. And they get criticized for the proposals that they have made. The public doesn't like them. But you know what? They're doing what we've asked them to do. And, you know, and I think it's the only fair way we can go ahead with this. And I think a lot of the criticism that's been leveled in terms of individuals on staff is extremely unfair in terms of the fact that they're simply doing what we've asked them to do. And the public and members of the public aren't happy with the outcomes that we may pursue as a result of those suggestions. And so it's easy to point fingers. You can't do that. I think it's a very well-run municipality. I have full faith in the staff. I know the constraints of the Municipal Act, not just in terms of financing, but just about everything else that constrains us in terms of it. And I think also coming back to the basic argument is that municipalities do not have the revenue funding they need. And you look at provincial and federal governments that are taking over 90 cents on the dollar of every tax collected in Canada and have put us in a very weak position in terms of just responding to our citizens and what they want and how to move this community forward. So there's a number of things here. A lot of it's philosophical. A lot of it is, in fact, hurtful in terms of the commentary. And I think also the very fact that as a municipality, you know, we do our very best all the time. And, you know, what we're finding today as we do all of this, everybody's unhappy. Well, that's supposedly supposed to be a good compromise. And I think we're coming up with a good compromise on this budget in a lot of respects. We're going to have to close pools. That's a fact. It's going to happen in a couple of years. You know what? We're not giving our staff the full COLA benefits that they deserve. That's not easy either. And we're making other cutbacks in other areas. So these are a lot of things that are going on. And I feel that Mr. Dyke, Mr. Fairweather in particular, have done the job we've asked them to do. And I think, Tricia, when you start talking about subsidized ICE rates and you really start to understand that there's a lot of hidden costs that the taxpayer is picking up, then we can understand better why we're moving the rates where we are. So I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Craig. And just to wrap up in what you said, I think it would really be wise or very beneficial if George, if you have the opportunity to sit down with Steve sometime and to talk about the differences, because there's such a chasm of differences between the two of us, and it's important to get that clarified. Councillor Amata.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, well, Mayor Craig did bring up a number of good points, such as you know, with the stormwater charge up in Kitchener-Waterloo, how that changes things, and how Waterloo is a higher population density than Cambridge. That is a well-known fact. There also, I think there are 64 kilometers squared. We're about 115,000 kilometers squared, and we have a huge rural component, whereas they're at their borders. And, you know, he mentioned Toronto, how they're getting the land transfer tax. So I do agree with a lot of that. I really do. And I do applaud staff for the work that they've done. I truly do, even though I can appear critical at times. I do appreciate the work they do. And, you know, I am very troubled, though, by this increase after all that we've done. Like, I know we've done a lot, given the circumstances. I'm not trying to criticize any of the work that's been done, and we've made some tough decisions, which I'm proud of this committee for doing. But, you know, I still struggle with the figure. I still do. There's a lot of people in our community who are struggling. There's people in my ward who might be losing their homes because they can't afford the taxes, and I think that's very sad. And I'm not here to lay blame on anyone. I'm really not. And I know that the province needs to step up and help the municipalities. I firmly do believe in that. I would just, though, I would like us to push a little harder to see what we can do with reductions. I know that there's a lot of things that are out of our control, and I know that I would even say there's an injustice out there against municipalities. I truly believe that. But you know, we have to deal with the circumstances that we're in. We have to deal with the cards that are dealt with. I mean, they may not be fair, but we've got to deal with it. And what I would like to see, I would like to get staff to examine the possibility. So when it comes to the lines that we can cut, the stuff that we do have control over, like obviously salaries and benefits and the collective agreements, that's off limits. I'd like to see if staff can go back and trim each line by 2%, tell council and report back to council, show us what that looks like, and then councillors can have the option. If they want to cut it by 2%, they can do it. If they want to leave the line alone, they can leave it. I think, you know, we need to try a bit harder, push a bit harder, and get that breakdown. And, you know, 2%, in my opinion, is not a lot. You know, of $10,000, it's $200. Of 2% of $100 is $2. 2% of $100,000 is $2,000. And obviously, if we were to say something like, you know, cut the fire department, right? Like, that's a big cut, right? That has a big impact. But what I'd like to see, if we could spread that 2% over a much larger area and do a little bit per line, I think it could add up. And I'm not saying it's going to be easy. I mean, there's going to have to be some changes made to be able to adjust to that. But I really would like us to try it out and see what we're capable of doing. And like I said, some lines we may want to do it with, and some we may be like, even that's too much. I would like to have that discussion at a later date.
Thank you, and I'm going to get Mr. Dyke to address that for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through to Councillor Mata. With respect to the nature of what you're talking about, that is the process we go through. Not specific to 2%, but that is the process we go through when we start reviewing the budget early in the year. So that's going to start again in February of 2018 going into next year. So that's the process we do follow. Just on to actually go through and do a 2% decrease of each line, we have roughly, just in the budget, there's about 9,000 to 9,500 lines in the budget of actual items. And each one of them isn't a standalone line. I mean, there's correlations between how some are linked to others. So to do that is quite an undertaking to do. So it wouldn't be something that could be done next week. One of the things we are looking at and going into 2018, into 19, I mentioned at the start, is that we are looking at the method of which we deliver our services. On a global basis, on a corporate-wide basis, and that kind of gets into, I think, and not trying to put words in, but I think it gets into the intent of what you're saying with respect to, are we delivering it the best we can or the most efficient way we can? And so we are looking for support from this committee and council going forward to, in 2018, to start a corporate-wide comprehensive service review, which gets into what services are we providing, first of all, and then how are they being provided, and what's the cost related to providing those services in relationship to like municipalities or other operations that provide that service. So we will be undertaking that. But going back before that, the issue of with respect to the straight percentages, we tend to try to look at them as both line by line as to a service grouping and as to what the impact of the cut would have on the service. Because as you can tell by the nature of the budgets that you've seen year over year, the increases to our service have been minimal with respect to the operating side, and we run very lean. And there is minimal excess in the budget on those type of things, and so that's where we're getting more into impact on services, which you can see with the information brought forward on the pools and things of that nature. So we've done internally, the numbers we brought forward to council have gone through that level of review at the staff level over the past 11 months. We can get in more detail onto more of the analysis of that service level through to conducting of a service review over the next year. That would report back and looking and hopefully have it be done probably late summer, looking with implementation into budgets in consideration implementation budgets in 2019 going forward.
Sorry, a question, Mr. Chair. Thank you, through you. So Gary, I know it's a lot of work. What can be done in a short time? Like if I were to put a motion, I would like to put a motion forward. Could we add up some of these lines and group them together? Like what can we do to make it easier for staff? Because I do want to make it easier for staff, I really do. Could we look at grouping them together, doing the cut, and then you figure it out in the new year about, like, I mean, there should be some kind of flexibility. That would be good.
Yeah. Again, through you, the chair, to Councillor Amata, with respect, that's been done. That's with the information we were sent away. Well, I think now we're upwards of $2 million that we've removed from the budget. And again, I draw your attention to the operating number. I get it. I understand the concept of what the total cost of the taxpayer is. But if you're looking at from a cut standpoint or elimination standpoint, two things I'll bring up is we're down to 1.3% on the operating budget increase, which is below the rate of inflation. So our premise has been, and which has been supported by this committee and council over the number of years, is cuts we're looking at are sustainable cuts. If you're not going to take something out, it needs to be sustainable over time. And we generally use the guideline internally on a 3 to 5 year window of being able to have that out of the budget. So we're there now. I can honestly say that we're there now. Because I know it's difficult to separate, but 1.3% is what the rate increase is for the operations of the city. There are things that have been talked about before. Well, those are capital items. So doing something with the capital item, it doesn't impact the 1.3%. Right, so so that's where we're at right now. I think we can really get into I'm going to say again, which I believe is the heart of your question, is how we deliver the service, and that's what the service review will give us, and that's the level of work. And it's about 8 to 9 months project to do it. Yes. Yeah.
So with that, Mayor Craig.
With that, Mayor Craig, thank you. I think, Councillor Mata, I understand where you're coming from. I understand, and I accept the fact that you have concerns about constituents. We all do. I think very simply, staff have done absolutely everything we've asked of them. I'm not going to ask them for any more in terms of getting into the weeds and going through line by line. And I think your only option is, to accept that or vote against the budget and express yourself about why you want to do that. I'm going to explain to people we have two limitations this year around. One is safety with Fire Hall number 6, and the fact that we need to put that in the budget, and it's a massive hit. And the other one has to do with the library, and it's been 20 years since the expansion of the downtown library has taken place. It's not a new library, it's an expansion of what's already there. And these are the two reasons why the budget is at 4.41 or 3.41, depending how we want to, or how the press wants to look at it. Okay?
So, thank you for the comments, Mike. I think we have the opportunity. We have an opportunity to do a service review in the following year. Before I continue, though, I'll get Councillor Devine. You've got a comment you want to make?
Yeah, just a couple comments. Nobody wants to see taxes go up. We have people in this community that suffer, and there's no doubt about it. But also, this process and procedure, and just a recommendation, and take it for what it's worth. We probably should have started earlier in the year, doing what we're doing now with this group. All right, we've had 3 meetings. There's been a little bit of controversy. But I would think if we started this process in October as opposed to November, and I understand it's election year, we could have huge changes in council. I get that. But I would think if we started with this group in October, I think we'd be better off and be further ahead than we are today. Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may. We actually did start it earlier because we used to do the budget in January and February. So here we are before Christmas getting the budget done. So we're way ahead.
Well, no, that's fine. I understand that. But this group needs to meet more times than we've met. Okay?
Mr. Dyke.
Just quickly, Councillor Devine, you raise a good point on the timing. up until this year, we were just not physically able to start any earlier because it was a more manual process. With our new system, I just confirmed with Mr. Fairweather, we should be able to advance that a little bit. So we'll definitely take that into consideration, look to starting this process earlier in the fall going forward.
So folks, thanks very much for the work that has taken place here today. This has been a very good process because we've had lots of dialogue, and I think it's so important to have the dialogue that we have because people have said that they won't accept 7.8, people have said they won't accept 5.2, 4.9 wasn't acceptable. And every single department in the city has taken a leadership role and demonstrated that they are part of the solution to reducing taxes. And I think everybody needs to be commended for that because it takes a lot of work when you get everybody involved to make a commitment to see the tax base come down to 4.41. That's not an easy process because we all have things that we want to see go through. We have those initiatives that we all like and we want to have access to, but at the same time, we have taxpayers who are nearing the tipping point of what they can afford. And I think by coming in at a 4.41% from 7.83, we've demonstrated that we have really tightened up on what we feel is acceptable for the community. Would I like to see it lower than 4.41? I think every one of us would like to see it lower than 4.41. We're not going to get there. I think we've done a great job to get to 4.41, and I think we have an opportunity to do the service review and see how we can glean savings in the future, and the directions to staff will be that we do a service review for 2019 and see where those savings can be identified. So right now we do have a budget before us at 4.41, and I'm going to put that on the floor, and I'm going to ask for a motion to accept that. Mayor Craig, do I have a seconder? Mr. Price, any comments? Councillor Devine.
Yeah, 4.41 is probably still a little bit high. I'll support the budget. Quite simply, the reason I'll support it is because it does have to go to council, and council will likely whittle it down again. Okay.
Sorry, council will what?
I said 4.41 still seems a little bit high, but I will support the budget because it has to go to council, and council will likely whittle it down some more.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, any other comments? We'll have a recorded vote.
Recorded vote?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through the chair, a recorded vote on adopting a recommendation for council on December the 19th at 4.41. In alphabetical order, Mayor Craig.
In favor?
Councillor Devine. Yeah. Councillor Amata. Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Gary Price.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
And Mr. Shepsky.
Opposed.
Thank you. The motion carries.
Mayor Craig.
Are we finishing up right now? Is that what you're doing?
We need one more motion in relation to a service review for 2000.
Yeah, I have something, if I may say at the end. Okay.
Thank you. Then I'd like direction. We have direction to staff to do a service review to see what other savings can be gleaned over the course of 2018, as was identified by Councillor Amata. Can I move that as direction to staff? Thank you.
Just wanted to say some good words about that I do support that, and I appreciate that. Thanks.
Thank you. And you had some comments?
Mr. Chairman, and I have a major disappointment this morning with regards to everything, and it deals with the clerk and his failure to bring coffee in for us this morning. I saw it being snuck in over on the far side over there, and I mean the stealth approach was something quite remarkable.
Just on that issue, Mayor Craig, just on that issue, you realize we are reducing taxes, and
that's
that was
right.
a budget
I forgot.
item.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair.
There is lunch, by the way, folks. Lunch is downstairs, and I do have a motion to adjourn. And Councillor Reid.
Yes, it's moved by myself and seconded by Mayor Craig that the council meeting is now adjourned at, what is it? 12:10.
Thank you very much, everybody, and thanks for your involvement.